Hi my dear friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel, Diana and the Book Hunt. We're already halfway throughout the month, so it's a good moment to kind of recap whatever I've read in the first part of December. I'm going to do a recent reads video where I'm going to focus on the books that I haven't discussed yet in vlogs. I'm going to mention the 3 books that I did mention in vlogs, and I'm going to link the vlogs up in the card so you can check them out if you haven't already. But then I'm going to focus on the books that I haven't discussed yet because there were a couple of interesting books here. I haven't given any of the books 5 stars, which is a pity, but at the same time I've been really happy with how my reading has been going because I don't know what it is, but I'm really in a mood to just binge read things. I don't know what it is, but I've been having a good time. So even though I haven't been giving any books 5 stars, I've just had a lot of fun while reading. So I'm going to tell you first of all, the 3 books that I finished for reading vlogs. The first one being Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. I've mentioned in the vlog before that this is one of my biggest disappointments of the year because I really love Things We Never Got Over. I gave that one 5 stars. And then the second book just wasn't it for me. There were a lot of things. It was, first of all, too long. The second is that I wasn't invested in the characters at all. The suspense kind of situation going on in the book didn't really catch my eye, didn't get me invested in the story. So there just wasn't a lot going on within the book that made me really intrigued within the plot or the story or the characters. And to be quite frank with you, when I finished that book, typically what I tend to do is I steer clear from any reviews about books that I haven't read yet. But then when I read them, I do want to know what other people think about them. So I've been kind of watching on BookTube what other booktubers think about this book. And when I listen to their opinions, I feel so validated that I really didn't like this book. I even would kind of lower my rating to a 1 star because there's just nothing that really worked for me within that book. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that just to not be cruel to the author, because obviously they did put a lot of effort within that book, but it just wasn't for me. So I'm going to stick to a 2-star rating, and I'm going to link the video up in the cards that I did, because actually this book and the next book up are ones that are included in that vlog. The second book is Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is another book that I read for that vlog. It was a vlog where I was reading books that are nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And I honestly don't know, obviously this book is hyped, so I understand that it's nominated, but I don't know how it got in the top 10 because there were definitely much better books than this one. And I don't think that it deserved to be in the top 10 spot this time around. Icebreaker by the same author was really great, so I do understand the hype behind that one. But this one just wasn't it for me. I found that it was very mediocre. The plot was very kind of predictable, very sweet, but nothing to write home about. So I gave that one 3 stars, and obviously wasn't a favorite. And then a book that was included in a different vlog of mine where I was reading holiday themed romances is Trick Shot. This book was really hot, really spicy. It did have some plot within it, so there was this secret identity thing going on within the book that kind of made it intriguing to know the conflict within the book. But it was most of all very hot and spicy. I really enjoyed it. I gave that one 4 stars, and I'm going to link the vlog up in the cards if you want to check it out. So now we're going to focus on the books that I read that I haven't discussed yet. The first one being My Xmas Emergency by Jennifer Peel. Now, when I started my booktube channel 2 years ago, the very first video that I posted was a holiday themed recommendation video. For that video, I had read The Holiday X-Files, I believe, by this author, and I think it was the only book that I gave 5 stars to. I was really enamored with that book. I don't know, the plot just worked for me, so I was really curious to see whether this holiday themed book would again be a 5-star read for me. I do appreciate a lot of things within the book. First of all, the tropes. It's a second chance small town romance. And then also the writing style of this author works for me. I believe that it's written in 3rd person, but it doesn't bother me when it's done in the way that it's done within the book, within this book specifically. I just didn't notice it very much. And then at the same time, I was really invested in the plot, which is a good thing. So I did give it a 4-star, but there were definitely some issues that I personally had with the with the story, which is why I didn't give it 5 stars. We've got our heroine who used to have a relationship with our hero when they were teenagers. She's from the wrong side of town, kind of the poor side of town, while he is from the rich side of town. And they had this relationship where both of them really thought that they were it for each other, but his family kind of meddled within the situation and they made him kind of break up with her. So he did, and it's been his biggest regret within his life. Now, in the present, she had moved away. She had gotten her, I think she's either a doctor or a nurse. I'm not sure. She's a medical person. And then he basically works for his family's business. And the thing that they share together is a niece, because his brother married her sister. And his brother just recently passed away. So she comes back to town to help her sister out with watching over her niece and just basically being there while they're grieving. And her niece is a teenager, so she's kind of playing a little game of matchmaker between her aunt and her uncle. So she's really desperately trying to get them together, and I love that within the plot. I really love that the niece played such an interesting part within the plot. He definitely knew that he needed to grovel, so he was thinking of ways. He obviously still has feelings for her, so he's wanting to grovel and to prove that it was a mistake breaking up with her and that he definitely wants to get back together with her. But the girl, she can hold a grudge. I mean, I've never in my life read a book where a woman can hold such a grudge within the story. She really made it difficult for him to get back into her good graces. Sometimes that's a good thing, but with her, it was a little too overdone in my opinion. So that's what kind of made me not fall in love with her character. And at the same time, I think that because the story started off with, you know, she's from the wrong side of tracks and everyone within the hometown that they live in kind of had this wild child persona made up for her while she was just a regular teenager doing teenager things. She kind of presents that persona of her teenage wild child thing as how they view her in the present, which is kind of narrow-minded, and she's kind of creating the stereotype of herself for herself, which is how she thinks people view her. And that's kind of weird to me. I don't know if it's very mature, a mature way to, I don't know, to process how people view you. And she is like in her mid-30s, so that for me was kind of weird. So I only had problems with her character essentially within the book, but I really did enjoy the story. I did enjoy the second chance aspect to it. I did enjoy that the hero was groveling and really trying to use all of the means that he had to try to get back into her good graces. And it is a holiday themed book, so it centers around the Christmas time. And I don't know, it was a good read. I definitely would recommend it. It's just that maybe I'm comparing it too much to the first book, where for the first book I just didn't have any kind of objections to it. But this one was a 4-star read for me. The next book I read is another holiday themed novella, and this one I found that it was so much fun. I don't know, it has a bit of a lower rating on Goodreads, which I don't understand honestly, because I found that it was, first of all, hilarious, and the second thing, that it really is leaning heavy towards the Christmassy feels. I'm going to explain why in a second. The book is called How to Lose a Guy Before Christmas by A.J. Pine, and it's an Audible original, so you can listen to it on Audible only, I think. And it's quite short. I think that the audiobook on 1 time speed is like 5 hours, so if you do it on 2 times speed, it's like 2.5 hours or so, so it's really short. And we've got the book starting off with the hero and heroine have had a one-night stand, and she ghosted him after this one-night stand. And they met up on this app, and he had messaged her after that, but she deleted the app, so she kind of really ghosted him. Now, In present time, they've kind of they've had, I think, this flight that was canceled because of a storm, and everyone has taken all of the places in the hotels nearby, and everyone is looking for a way to get out of that airport. So the hero has hired this car, and because it's quite an expensive thing to get this rent a car and drive all the way down to where he needs to be, he decides to use another app for a ride share, and the heroine does the same. So they match up through this app to kind of share the ride together. And when they encounter each other, it's quite an awkward situation, obviously, because, you know, she ghosted him, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is like my worst nightmare. A person who didn't want to spend time with me after we had sex is here, and like, how do you react to that? So they start to go wherever they need to go, but something happens and the car breaks down, or they kind of hit something. I don't remember what it was, but the car malfunctions in some way, and they get stranded in this small town that is kind of all about Christmas. But all of the residents are kind of senior residents, I think, and they all have these naughty games, and the hotel there is kind of set up to be like this sleazy kind of 80s porn movie kind of hotel, but very Christmassy at the same time. So just the whole atmosphere is really weird but really fun. And when you start to read about all these things, it made me laugh out loud, let me put it like this. And all the situations that they get into, so they do this karaoke, this Christmas bingo or something. They do these games with these seniors who are all just out of the world crazy funny. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. It was so much fun, and it was very much Christmas centered, so I really enjoyed it, and I definitely gave it 4 stars. The next read I had is not a holiday themed read because I kind of needed a break from that, and I listened to the audiobook by Katherine Center called Hello Stranger. This one was also nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards, but it didn't make the top 10. I actually wanted to read this one for the vlog that I did, but by the time that my hold became available for it for the audiobook, it was kind of too late to include it. So I just read it regardless because I knew that I was going to enjoy it just based off of the synopsis of the book. This book is so interesting. I was so intrigued by the synopsis of it, and when I started to read it, I was immediately captivated by the story. We've got our heroine who, she's part of this well-off family, but her father is very much focused on, you need to be ambitious and successful, and you're going to follow in my footsteps. He's a doctor, and he wanted her to become a doctor. She enrolled into medical school, but she actually doesn't want to be a doctor. She wants to be an artist, just like her mother, who has passed away. And she decides to just quit medical school and to become an artist, and that's when her father disowns her. He's like, if you're going to be an artist, you need to live like an artist. You're going to starve yourself. If you want to prove yourself, go ahead, but you're not going to make it if you ask me. So he disowns her, and she starts to live the life of an artist. She has this competition coming up that her mother also participated in, and she very much wants to win it, also to prove to her father that she can make it as an artist. And she's a portrait artist, so she's painting people most of all. But what happens is she has this medical issue that leaves her needing to get brain surgery. And after this brain surgery, she becomes face blind. This is a very interesting kind of a condition that I had never heard about, but apparently it's a thing. So basically, a part of your brain does not allow you to recognize what you're seeing when it comes to faces. So you kind of see faces in a distorted way. You don't really see their facial features. You only see maybe their expressions. And that's really interesting because obviously she's a portrait artist, and she has only a couple of weeks to enter her work into this competition, and she doesn't know how she's going to do it because she doesn't see faces. She has a romance with a guy who is living in her building, and at the same time, the vet for her dog, is asking her out on a date, and she has this date planned with her vet. So she's kind of playing on two fronts at the start of the story, let's put it like that. But for me, I don't know, that part, so the romance part within the plot was very predictable. That's not a bad thing. Within this story, I knew what was going to happen in the end. I also really enjoyed her dynamic with the neighbor as well as her best friend. I also really enjoyed how the whole face blindness is handled within the book. So how it's described and what she feels like and what happens when she encounters someone new, someone she has never met. How does she recognize the people that she does know? That was really interesting to me. I really was fascinated by the story. And the only thing that made me mark it down to 4 stars is how abominable her family is, because her father has remarried and her stepmom and her stepsister are just horrible people. So within the story, they're basically there to make her life miserable. So that's the only thing that kind of left me feeling anxious all the time, that she didn't have a good support system from her home base. But otherwise, the story was really great. I gave it 4 stars. It was a very fascinating read, and I definitely want to pick up more by this author. Next book that I read is another holiday themed book. It's called Solo for the Season by Martha Keyes. This book was nothing to write home about, to be quite honest. The book centers on our heroine, who goes on this Christmas retreat by herself because she has recently broken off her relationship. She wants to be somewhere where it's very Christmassy, so a kind of a cabin in the woods where it's very snowy, and she gets to that place, and it turns out that the person who is working there, who is managing the cabins, he is someone from her past, someone from her like high school period, I think. And he didn't used to be very nice to her during her high school period, so she's kind of wary of him. And it turns out that he is there, and also another person from their high school time is there who really wants to get with him. This woman, she has kind of set her eyes on him and she wants to be with him, which is very kind of predictable within the story, that that's going to be the drama within the book. And he doesn't want to be with that other person, he wants to be with the heroine, but he kind of needs to prove himself to her. At the same time, the management of those cabins doesn't want him to get involved with anyone from the guests, so there is kind of a conflict, a forbidden situation. But it was just an okay read. I gave it 3 stars. It's nothing to write home about. I mean, it was enjoyable to just read about the Christmassy feel, the atmosphere within the place that they were settled in, but just nothing to write home about, to be quite honest. So a 3-star read. And then I picked up a book by Adriana Herrera. I knew that this was going to be a smutty good time, so a very steamy book. It's a sapphic romance, a holiday themed romance called Her Night with Santa. We've got one of our heroines who is playing the role of Santa, and another heroine who is staying in this house for one night only. It's one of her family's houses, and we know that this is actually the residence of Santa. And she assumes that the night, because it's Christmas Eve, she assumes that the house will be empty. So this heroine who is staying in this house for only one night, she is the developer of adult toys. So she gets into this house and she immediately starts to test out her own toys. And then Santa comes home and they have a steamy good time together. Basically, that's what the book is about. It's very short. It's about an hour and a half. I think it was an hour and a half of an audiobook. So it's just a steamy good time. I gave it 3 stars. Again, nothing to write home about. If you're in for just kind of making your Goodreads goals and you want to read something very short and very smutty, this is definitely one to go with. Now I'm going to talk about 2 interesting reads. The first one is A Soul to Keep by Opal Reyne. I think I saw this book. It was recommended by Jenn from the Book Refuge. She gave it, I think, 5 stars, and I was very intrigued by this book because it's a monster romance, but I don't know, the cover just spoke to me, and I saw that I had it available on audiobook. We've got our heroine who is going to be sacrificed to this demon. I don't know if it's a demon or a monster. I don't know how to call it. because they need to sacrifice someone every once in a while within their community. She doesn't want to be sacrificed, but she has no choice. She needs to be a virgin, and she has exactly the features that this demon prefers. And basically, she gets sacrificed. He takes her with him to this kind of a shadow place, kind of like an underworld type of place, a magical type of place. He has built this cabin. She's staying with him at the start. She is like, I don't know how I'm going to survive here. And she actually thinks that he's going to eat her because he does eat humans. But she's very curious as to how she can escape the situation. And she also finds that he's very curious about her. So she starts to ask a lot of questions. She wants to get to know him. And basically we find out that this demon monster kind of entity, that he is just looking for some companionship, and he very much is the biggest cinnamon roll that you can imagine. And I really enjoyed the story. It was a very interesting monster romance. It had a lot of things going for it. I wouldn't say it's a 5-star read because I wasn't wowed by it, but the conflict within the book was very interesting as well, because he had fallen in love with another human in the past who really hurt him. So basically he was very afraid that the heroine would do the same, that she wouldn't fall in love with him because of his appearance. But at the same time, it was very relatable, that specific part within the plot. So I really enjoyed that. And yeah, it was a very good read. I gave it 4 stars, and I definitely would recommend it if you're into monster romances. And then the last book I read is Slaying the Shadow Prince by Helen Scheuerer. Scheuerer? I don't know how to pronounce this author's name, but yeah, basically I saw that this book would become available to me on audio through Storytel, and it wasn't a very long book, and it's a fantasy book. So I was like, this looks interesting because it sounds like it's going to be a standalone, and I'm all in for standalone fantasy books that are not very long, because those are the type of reads that I think are easily digestible. So I started it off, and immediately I kind of started to notice the same vibes that I got from Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. But because I've just recently read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, I don't know what it is, but it kind of sounded like a very, I don't want to say it like that, but like a very cheap knockoff of that type of a story. So I've been kind of reviewing for myself whether Fourth Wing was a very good book, and I actually now think that it's not a very good book. I mean, when I read it, I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it, and I would stand by my rating of 4 stars for that book because I really enjoyed it. But when I think about it, there were a lot of things that were not very well done within that book. And then this book was even worse in the execution. So it was kind of predictable. It was kind of, I don't know, you got taken into the story, but you kind of knew where everything was going. The connection between the characters was very weak. I think also kind of the backstory within the plot was also a bit weak. So yeah, I don't think that this was very well executed, in my opinion. It does have a gorgeous cover, but the plot was just subpar. It's a story which is focusing on an enemies to lovers dynamic, where we've got a guy who has become this creature that everyone is hunting, but no one knows that he has become this creature. He's kind of like a warlord who is fighting for the good guys. And the heroine, she is this woman who actually shouldn't be fighting, but she has been taught to fight, so she's fighting also for the good cause. And they're fighting against these creatures who are very similar to kind of like the, I think, what were they called in the Fourth Wing, Venom or something like that. I don't know, these creatures really reminded me of them. So yeah, they're fighting against this evil that is growing and growing and is kind of ruining society. And they're enemies because she has this bracelet that shows her who is this kind of a creature. And she immediately finds out that he is this kind of a creature, while everyone else thinks that he's just a simple warlord. So she really hates these creatures because they murdered her family. And yeah, it's a classic enemies to lovers story where he proves to her that he hates the being that he has become and that not everyone of that species is bad. And they start to work together to kind of overpower the evil that has come loose within their society. So yeah, I don't know, it's kind of like a cheap knockoff of Fourth Wing if you ask me. So it was a semi-good time, but I honestly wouldn't recommend it. So yeah, these were the 10 books that I managed to finish in the first part of December. As you heard, I didn't really have any major hits. I did enjoy some of the books like Hello Stranger and A Soul to Keep, and a couple of the romances that were the holiday romances. I really had a good time with them. They weren't very memorable, but I did enjoy them. And I'm going to continue on looking for really good reads by the end of the month as well. I am currently reading another Katherine Center book, The Bodyguard, so I'm having high hopes on that one of it being a 5-star read as well, and I'm going to wrap it up at the end of the month so you can see what I read in the later part of December. And I hope to see you in the next one. Have a wonderful, marvelous day. Happy reading. Take care and bye-bye.